the GBC at the time, he came to the door and he looked at us and then he said, "Hari Sori, come here." So Hari Sori came, and then they spoke for a minute or two, and then Hari Sori came back and said, "I'm leaving, I'm going to Delhi to do some service for Prabhupada." And then he became Prabhupada's servant. So I always wondered what would have happened if he would have been on the top and I was holding the ladder. But anyway, that was that. Then another devotee that I met, an English devotee here that I became friends with, was Charanaravindam. And he was the sensitive, artistic type, and he did the Prabhupada's garden and the lotus pond, and he loved that. He was so into it. And he got lotus flower seeds from the lotus and had brought them back to Vrindavan and planted them in that so that Prabhupada would have lotuses. And he took me around to various different kunds and different places around Vrindavan. Another English devotee that was here at the time that I became friends with was Rajashekar. He's still here. Then, that was all in 75. Then in 76, I became a Sankirtan devotee, distributing Srila Prabhupada's full sets of books to all the libraries. And Satyanarayan and I, he's not here now, we were a team. We went all over India. So we were from Delhi, we went all over Haryana, we went all over Punjab, we went to Jammu, and then we thought, let's go to Kashmir. Kashmir is 80% Muslim. So we went to Kashmir and we distributed full sets of Prabhupada's books in all the Muslim libraries. So at that time, I discovered something that nobody else in the world knew. I was coming back from one college in the rickshaw, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the sign that made us stop, do everything, and that sign was library. So I asked the rickshawala to stop, and I went back, and Oriental Library. So I went in there, and I was looking at all the books there. They had all these old books, Shastras in different languages, Sanskrit, Pali, Kashmiri, old ones, the new ones. I thought, this is perfect for Srila Prabhupada's books. So the librarian saw me looking, so he came forward. And of course, in those days, we were brahmacharis, but we had a briefcase and a card. It said, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Vyasaki Das Brahmachari, New York, London, Los Angeles, Bombay. So I handed him my card. And then, he looked at it, and then I gave him a Srimad Bhagavatam. I said, I'm representing the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. We're distributing the Encyclopedia of Vedic Knowledge. That's what we call a full set of Prabhupada's books, the Encyclopedia of Vedic Knowledge. You should have this in your library. So he looked at the book, saw Prabhupada's picture, and he went through it like that. He handed it back, and he said, I think we have this already. I said, Kashmir. Srinagar. So I said, it's impossible. These books have just arrived in India. First time ever translated into English. It's not possible that you have this. So he said, well, let me check. So he went back behind a bunch of books, and I was just waiting. And about 5 minutes later, he came holding Prabhupada's first 3 volumes. And he said, the author himself came here and I purchased these from him. So I said, but look, that's only the first canto. Now we have the rest. And we have a standing order for all the books when they'll be finished. So you should have the whole set, not just the first canto. So I sold him, he took the whole set. So when I came out of there, I was like in ecstasy. Because I was thinking, I just distributed books to the same person that Prabhupada distributed books to. And later on, I found out that I wasn't the only devotee that had done that. There was one other devotee who had distributed books to the same person that Prabhupada had done. And that was Daivi Shakti Mataji. She had done it in Bombay, and I had done it in Kashmir. So Satyanarayan and I, we wanted to come back immediately to Vrindavan because we knew Prabhupada was here, and tell him that we distributed the books in Kashmir. So at that time, Jagadish was Prabhupada's secretary. So both Satyanarayan and I knew him. So we came back, had got our room in the ashram, bathed, put on new tilak and fresh cloth. Came to Jagadish, we told him we just came back from distributing full sets of Prabhupada's books in Kashmir. And on the way back, we passed an apiary and we stopped and we got a whole big bottle of Himalayan honey for Prabhupada. So I said, we have this Himalayan honey, we just tell Prabhupada, we'd like to see him. So he said, well, Prabhupada's already with the guest, so he can't see you now. So then we said, well, can you ask him when he will see us? So he said, okay. So he went in. Now, it was all situated differently in those days. The door into Prabhupada's room was over there, which is the door leading to where there's now the sweet shop. So we waited there. There was no Govinda's restaurant, no sweet shop. And then he came out 5 minutes later and said, Prabhupada will see you now. So we came in through that door and through there. This was not here. There was no railing here. Prabhupada was sitting there behind this desk, and there was an Indian gentleman, and there was Gopal Krishna. And when we came in, Satyanarayan and I, Prabhupada said to the Indian gentleman, he went like this, here are two very nice boys. So we offered our flat-out dandavats, and then the Indian gentleman and Gopal Krishna got up, and they departed. And then we came and sat down in front of Srila Prabhupada. And we explained that we'd just come back from distributing full sets of your books in Kashmir. So then Prabhupada said, oh, I went to Kashmir before I went to America. And then I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, I met that person you sold the books to, and he took the rest of the whole set of your books in that library. So it was such a connection with Prabhupada.
What did he say?
Well, Prabhupada didn't, I don't remember him commenting about the library, but what he did say, he said, do you remember coming out of the tunnel? Because when you cross from Jammu into Kashmir, you go through a huge tunnel. And when you come out of the tunnel, you're in Kashmir, and this is huge Kashmir Valley. And when we went through that tunnel and came out, we went, wow. So then Prabhupada said, do you remember going through that tunnel? And then all of a sudden you see the Kashmir Valley, and his eyes went wide as if he was seeing it again. And I was thinking, wow, he had the same experience, the wow experience that we had also. So then we shared that 10 or 15 minutes with Prabhupada, and he preached to us and everything, and we gave him the bottle of honey. And then Palika...
Prabhupada never asked us to do something that he had already done himself.
Yeah. So then Palika was Prabhupada's cook at the time. So he asked us to give the bottle to Palika. And then Palika later on told us that every morning Prabhupada would have that honey with his breakfast, and he enjoyed it very much. So that was a very wonderful pastime that we remember from here in those days. And there was 3 pastimes. I can only remember 2. Whatever happened, my mind went blank. But anyway, so those are what I remember. Okay, I was also here when Prabhupada he was ill, and we were going into his room and chanting Hare Krishna, and then devotees were asking him about what will happen, the succession. So we were in the Brahmacharya ashram. We would be getting the news every day. So then we heard one day that Prabhupada had appointed 11 Ritviks. It's the first time we heard the word Ritvik. They were called Ritviks. So that's what we heard. And, we just accepted that they were to carry on helping Prabhupada initiate disciples until he left the body, and then after that they would become regular gurus. That was our understanding. So we were there at that time also. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Namo Vishwavadaya Krishna Staya Putli. Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Saraswati Devi Gaurivani Vicharana Visesha. So my experience was a little different because I had never been to a temple, a bona fide ISKCON temple before in my life. My experience of Srila Prabhupada was on the back cover of a Krishna book. You know, the one where Prabhupada's looking down at a champak flower, a nag champak flower. And I came out of the hills of Kathmandu because I was told by two looping sannyasis to go down and get initiated by Srila Prabhupada. I'd never been to a temple before, and they weren't exactly following all the regulative principles. And I'm not really sure whether they were chanting, but one of them was chanting on bone beads because he lost his other beads. Anyway, I came to Vrindavan, and the experience, I had been living in India and Nepal for a couple of years, and I wasn't, I kind of dismissed most of the so-called spiritualists that I had met, but somehow I didn't dismiss these devotees. Somehow I think it's because whatever they repeated, which was exactly what Srila Prabhupada said, had the same potency. Of this I'm convinced, even though they were a little off. So when I arrived in Vrindavan, I think I came by Tonga from Mathura, or from Delhi, whatever it was. And then when I came into Vrindavan, and then I came towards the temple, I noticed how very effulgent, and everything was so effulgent. The sands of Vrindavan, even the birds looked like they were effulgent. The not pigeons, what are the other ones called, the brown pink ones? Mourning doves, they're called doves. And you could see peacocks everywhere, and there were so many nice cows running around. But everything was so effulgent, and it was almost surreal. And then at one point, there was a big ambassador car. Now, you never saw cars in Vrindavan at that time. This is 1974. You never saw a car, but I saw this car coming from the direction from the temple. And in that car, I recognized two very famous people. One was Ravi Shankar, and the other one was George Harrison. I'm not sure if there was another one of those Beatles out there too, but whatever it was, it just added to the effect of being surreal. The whole thing was surreal. So then I made it to the temple, and the temple was not a temple. The temple was a construction site. It had a foundation, and it had a whole bunch of pillars with steel sticking out of the cement. I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know what was going on. It wasn't until 20 years later, maybe more, that I discovered finally that I had arrived at a time when the temple was supposed to be opening. but it wasn't opening. And one morning, Gunarnava Prabhu requested all the devotees to give some donation to the construction. So I had left Nepal. I had left all the rest of my money in the hands of, I had donated it to these two looping sannyasis on the strength that one of them was telling me that it's okay, Jamuna will take care of you when you get there. So I had 100 rupees left. That was all I had. I kept 100 rupees just in case. So I thought, well, they're asking for a donation, and how far is 100 rupees going to go anyway? So I just gave that my last 100 rupees. I would say that on the basis of that, somehow I got the privilege of coming much later to serve in Vrindavan. I gave it completely freely and from my heart. Of course, then I was called in by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who was then the GBC, who informed me that now nobody who's not connected with the construction site may stay in Vrindavan. And I said, well, I just gave my last 100 rupees. And then he said to me, oh, what will you do? And I looked at him straight in the eye. And I guess I repeated something that I had heard from others. And I said, well, I'm sure Krishna will provide something. And he looked down. I said, somehow or other, I've always been like that. What you see is what you get. So somehow or other, he didn't know what to say, didn't say anything. Hare Krishna. So somebody heard about the story, and then they gave me some money so I could go back to Nepal, where I could get a ticket and leave. And actually, how I came in the country, I came by another, not exactly the legitimate way. Anyway, I went back by with Charnar Vindam and Mahadev, because Shamasundar had some idea that one of the sannyasis there would be interested in his jewel mines, that he had a ruby mine or something. So I went with them, and then I came back. They asked me what was my new name. I said, well, I couldn't get initiated. Lakshmi Moni told me I had to live in a temple for 6 months. And that temple that I passed through, the president was Tejas. And somehow or other, they didn't see myself living in that temple for 6 months. So he told me to go back to Mayapur. There's a festival and you get initiated. So I went back, and Prabhupada was there. There were no pavilions. It was all tables set up with different pictures, photographs of the whatever was going on in the different temples. And Mahadev helped me write my application for initiation. And Shamasundar Prabhu, sight unseen, signed it, recommended me. And in the next couple of days, I was sitting in a fire sacrifice. And Prabhupada asked me the 4 regulative principles, which I knew, but I got kind of stuck on the gambling one, but Prabhupada filled it in. Prabhupada filled it in for me. And then after that, after the fire sacrifice, I chanted my first 16 rounds, because I'd never been instructed before that to do that. And the rest is history. But so then later I found out that Ravi Shankar, like 20, 25 years later, I found out that Ravi Shankar and George Harrison were Harry's son. We're here talking with Srila Prabhupada. I had no idea what was going on, and I had no idea that there was supposed to be a temple opening. So for the temple opening, I was probably in Nairobi. You came soon after that, and it was. I think Charnar Vindam came and created a pond over there too in Nairobi. Yeah. He put a few fish in there too. Anyway, so that was my experience with Vrindavan.
And Mahadev came also.
And I'm so grateful to have somehow or other, by some quirk of Krishna's infinite mercy that I was able to come here when Prabhupada was here, and also to Mayapur, and also to be able to do some small service for the construction. Was kind of pitifully small, but it was all I had. Hare Krishna. All glories to Prabhupada.
Update on Charnar Vindam. Yeah. We've done several programs with Charnar Vindam in London, and recently, he lives in the south of, near Brighton, and he does kirtan. He has his own style of doing kirtan, and he's quite eccentric, but still totally into Prabhupada and into Krishna consciousness. Yeah, he has a Gopal deity, yeah. So, yeah, he was always talking about his Gopal deity. But he goes by the name of Cosmic John.
By the name of what?
Cosmic John. That's who he. So that's Charnar Vindam. If you're on Facebook, Cosmic John is Charnar Vindam. Hare Krishna.
You want to say anything else? I know you always talk. And let the dress up.
The one thing Daiva Shakti said this morning really I understood very well, because she was saying how everything that was going on, and as all she knew, she was in the kitchen cooking. So for me it was that same thing. Whatever was going on, all I knew was at that time that was the servants' quarters right there, and that's where I spent most of my day. And during those days, the bell was ringing a lot, right, Brahmananda? Every 10 minutes, Prabhupada would be ringing the bell, as I said. And
One ring was for you, or two rings was for me?
Yeah, we had a system. It had, when I first joined, it was the bell rings, it's for you. But then we became more sophisticated as the years went by. So one ring was for the servant, and two rings was for the secretary. And the secretary was staying on that side of Prabhupada, and the servant, we were staying on that side, and Daiva Shakti, or whoever was cooking in the back room. That was the kitchen at that time. And the deities, you know where the deities were staying, right? Before they were right there in this room there. And they were, of course, all covered up, but sometimes you could go in and peek at the deities if you... And that was 74, right, where the deities were in there, and the ladies, the various Matajis who were putting the clothes together, they would go in there and taking their measurements and everything, so they were doing all of that service. And Pishima, when was she here? That was 74? That was also, and 75, because we kept talking about how Prabhupada was very conscious about what the local Goswamis were thinking, and that went, that wasn't just during the ceremony, that was a 24-hour-a-day thing. He was very aware of what they thought about everything, to the point when Pishima would come and sit down, she would come to see her brother, her older brother, her love of her life. Prabhupada was, she loved Prabhupada more than anyone. And she would come and sit there as often as she could. And I think the relationship never changed, because she was like Prabhupada's kind of pesky little sister that he loved very much, But she would come in and she would, disregarded anyone that tried to stop her. And she would sit down there, and then the bell would ring. Right away, Prabhupada would ring the bell, and he would say, "Sit," just like you would say to the dog. "Sit," he would go, and I'd sit. And he'd say, "Even she's my sister," he said, "they'll talk." And the "they'll" meant all these Swamis, these Goswamis, caste Goswamis, they'll talk that he's alone with a woman who was his sister. So that was Pishima. And, she loved Prabhupada so much. And she was here, and like many of us, she really had nowhere to stay. I think our God sisters, they brought her here at that time, right? And Prabhupada was like, what is my sister doing here? And I said, oh, Prabhupada, I think, some of your disciples, the ladies they brought him, and he just shook his head like, what is she doing here, you say? So then what is she doing here was even to the point of, that was my room. And in 74, when I was ill and had malaria, and Prabhupada walked through, he used to walk through there to go to his bathroom. So it was kind of a strange situation. So at this time, I was, as we all were, sick.
The women were treating Pishima
like Prabhupada. Yeah.
Yeah, they would bow down and, serve her and this and that.
It gave them something they didn't have with Prabhupada.
Yeah.
And so they were, she was like the via media for them to...
Yeah, and then...
Although she was, yes, everything. She was shorter and rounder, a lot heavier. And she would always sprinkle Ganga Jal on everyone. She would, I don't know whether she did it because she was, because we were also Western.
And we had to be purified by being in her.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So.
But Prabhupada...
no, he wasn't keen on what had happened.
And he saw her being worshipped.
No.
After the grand opening, when Prabhupada left on the 30th, that very day, Gopal Krishna Maharaj came to me and he said, I have a message for you from Prabhupada. He said to tell you that his sister is not a pure devotee. And you shouldn't offer your obeisances to her.
So when I was sick with malaria in 74, he said the message was, my sister is not a pure devotee. You should be, right? We shouldn't offer you shouldn't offer your obeisances to her. You should offer them to him. So Prabhupada went through that room in 74. You were there. Actually, everyone, that was where we would sit and take prasadam. So everyone's taking prasadam. It's lunchtime, and I'm lying on the floor in the corner, dying. And Prabhupada walked through, and he looked at everyone eating, and then he looked at me, and he said, why is Shrutakirti lying on the floor? He said, call a doctor. He said, get him a doctor. He said, and get him a bed so that he can lie in a bed. And I was like, thank you. So then there was a bed there from that time. So then in 75, Pishima was here, so she was seeing Prabhupada. So one day after lunch, I go into the servants' quarters, and she's sound asleep on my bed. So, you know how I was. So of course, I went to Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Pishima is on my bed. And he just shook his head. And he said, she can't do that. He said, tell her she can't do that. And Pishima and I, we didn't have the best relationship. She had a wonderful relationship with everyone except me, I think.
She was jealous of you.
Yes, because I stopped her from seeing Prabhupada. So she didn't, from the Calcutta on, she just never really, her and I didn't get along very well because Prabhupada said, don't let her in. And Prabhupada said to me, tell her she can't stay there. And I just looked at, I said, Prabhupada, I can't tell her anything. I said, she doesn't appreciate me very much. He said, all right. He said, bring her in, I'll talk to her.
You have to wake her up.
Well, I waited till she woke up. You wasn't going to wake her up. So, and then she was up, and I did poke her a little, and I said, Prabhupada wants to see you. And like everyone, when you would say that, she had a big smile on her face. Prabhupada wanted to see her. So of course she comes in and she would offer her obeisances. It took her a few seconds, get down, get up again, and big smile. And then they had a discussion, of course, in Bengali. And I was sitting there through it, and then Prabhupada looked at me and he said, "It's okay." So of course the very next day she's lying in bed sleeping again. And I just shook my head and I went out there, and sat there and waited for her. So that was, they had Prabhupada, Prabhupada had a nice time. But he was always her older brother, made fun of her a lot, Prabhupada did. The one time when I tell, it's one of my favorite times was with Prabhupada in Calcutta, and I was massaging him before lunch, and he just started laughing. And he said, "Do you know anyone," he said, "who is fat without eating?" And I knew he was talking about his sister, and I said, "No, Prabhupada." He said, "Neither do I." He said, "But my sister insists that she barely eats anything." He said she hardly eats, and then she complains to me that she's sick. And I say, "Well, don't eat so much." So now he's going back and forth telling me their conversation. And he said, "I tell her, don't eat so much, and you won't be so heavy, and you'll feel better." He said, "But she insists she's hardly eating." He said, "Do you know anyone that can get so big without eating?" So we're both laughing. I said, "No, Prabhupada." So then that evening there's darshan, like Prabhupada had here everywhere in India. That was what kept everyone in India, was Prabhupada. It was open door policy, right? Like nowhere else, because he knew the only thing you had, the only pleasure you had, was his association. Everything else was a struggle. So now he's sitting in that little room there on Albert Road, and there's like 10 devotees there. Everyone was there. Gargamuni was there, and Ekanath, and all the devotees are sitting, and Prabhupada's just chatting, very nice, very informally. And his sister comes in. So she comes in and offers her obeisances, and she sits in the corner. And of course she was swathed always in her white sari, like 10 yards of cloth, it seemed, just around and around and around. And she sits down, and big smile, like she had the black glasses. And Prabhupada just looks at her, and he said, "Just see my sister." And everyone looks, and she said, "See how fat she is." And everyone just goes hysterical, and Prabhupada's just saying, "Just see." And then he said the exact same story to all of his disciples sitting there. And everyone's just laughing, and Prabhupada's laughing. And of course, Pishima, she's laughing, because everyone's laughing. Everyone laughs. Of course, she didn't understand a word of what was going on, but she's laughing and laughing and laughing, So Prabhupada had fun with her. And she would cook for him every day. And she would smuggle in mustard oil in her sari, because we didn't use mustard oil. We never use mustard oil. So she would bring it into the temple. And I was cooking for Prabhupada in Calcutta, and she would cook. So it was like, it wasn't a competition. There was no competition, but we would bring both plates in. So of course every day Prabhupada's eating. He loved what she cooked, So this went on for 3 days. So then the next day I bring it in, put the plate down, I go get the other plate, and I have Pishima's plate in my hand, all the Bengali preparations. And Prabhupada said, "Don't bring that in here." He said, "My sister's trying to kill me." He said, "You eat it." And he's pointing to me. He said, "You eat it." And I said, I was always sick. I said, "Prabhupada," I said, "I can't eat this." He said, "Well, whatever." He said, "Distribute it to the others." He said, "But don't bring it in here."
Not because it was bad.
No, he liked it.
But because it was
superb. He liked it, and he couldn't not eat it. That was the point. Like Prabhupada said, I have a tongue. I also have a tongue. So he liked it very much, but he wasn't digesting it. He said it was making him sick. Of course, Pishima said he can digest stones. So she had a very, she saw him as a very most transcendental, pure devotee. But that was Pishima's involvement here. She was also here for that time.
Actually, for the ladies, Pishima was like a mother to us. She was so kind. And she taught me how to cook. No one wanted to work in the kitchen with her, and I was the newest kid on the block, so they put me as her assistant here. And we had no way to communicate because I was new. I didn't know any Hindi or Bengali, and she only knew Bengali. She used to go 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. That was how much English she knew. So as her assistant, she would have to use sign language and to teach me how to assist her. And she was so wonderful. She had a bed. She did have a bed. We lived over at Seth Bishanshan's place, but it was far, and it was the middle of the summer, you know. So that's why we would sometimes sleep with the deities. Remember that? So at the place where we stayed at Seth Bishanshan's, she was the only one with a bed, and because I was her helper, she would have me sleep at her feet on the bed, and we had a fan. She was so kind. And we would cook for Prabhupada. Of course, she would cook, I would do the coolie work. She called me Prabhupada's coolie to him, and he liked that. And she told Prabhupada, you have 3 cooks and 1 coolie, because there was Pranav's wife, Anamalini, and Prabhavati, she would come from Imli Tala, and Pishima. They would all cook for Prabhupada each day when he was sick to increase his appetite. And then after they would cook for Prabhupada, we would cook for the servants, Brahmananda and Bhagavan. You were over there at that time, right? And we would just make boiled sabjis for you. And one day, and then after all the cooking was finished, we would sit down Pishima and serve her prasadam. And she would eat just a little bit. She really would just eat a little bit. I know, I would serve her. And one day we're sitting there, this is when the kitchen was there in Prabhupada's bedroom, and I'm serving her. I give her the Mahaprasadam on the plate, and it's such an art to not give too much and to not give too little. And just by accident, I put too much on her plate. And just then Prabhupada walks in the room, and she's very angry with me because I gave her just a touch too much of the sabji. And Prabhupada watches this, and he scowled at me that, you know, why weren't you more careful not to give so much? So one of those days, there was no prasadam left afterwards, and I would be the last one to eat, of course, because, you know, you have to serve everybody, and then whatever's left over, that's what I'd get to eat. And some days there would just be nothing. And she would go out, she would take a nap, and then I'd wash the pots, remember, in the bathroom and all that. Prabhupada's bathroom was there in his closet. But she just happened to notice one day that there was nothing left for me to eat. Nothing. And I was used to it. But she noticed it that day. And she was so soft-hearted that when she saw that I had nothing to eat, she immediately went over to the stove and sat down and cooked something for me to eat. She made me spinach pakoras, and she made me eat it. I mean, nobody did things like that in the temple in those days. If you didn't get prasadam, you didn't get prasadam. It's nobody's business. But she was so sensitive and so loving that she just sat there and cooked something for me. And we would never cook for ourselves in those days. And she trained me how to cook everything, Bengali style. And then in 1975, at the grand opening one day, after things had quieted down. Prabhupada called me in, and he said to, no, maybe it was August. Yes, it was when Prabhupada came back the second time, and Pishima had stayed through the whole summer with us. And he called me in one morning, and he said to me, you have learned now nicely from my sister how to cook. So now I want you to cook with modification, and she can take rest. So from that day, she stopped coming into the kitchen, but she would come to the window every day and tell me what to cook for Prabhupada. And this went on for months. And Prabhupada was happy, but she was very unhappy because she would normally get the Mahaprasadam, but once she was out of the kitchen, the servants would take all the Mahaprasadam. So she went and was crying one day to Prabhupada that I'm not getting any of your prasadam anymore. So Prabhupada changed that. I think Upendra was a servant then. And it was a very loving family feeling when Prabhupada and Pishima were here. We were all, really, we felt like their children in some way. And she was so affectionate and so sensitive to the devotees around her. Then in Mayapur, the same experience, the prasadam was making Prabhupada sick. So he would not let me bring him the prasadam that she offered. He would make me put it, he would get angry at me for even bringing it. So then we had to, figure out some arrangements so that even if she did cook, we would just put it aside somewhere. So whatever you hear about Pishima, she loved Prabhupada dearly. I was just reading last night when she left in Mayapur, how Bhavananda had Nitai Chand carry her up the stairs so she could stay there. And it was a wonderful, loving family relationship that we had, both with Prabhupada and Pishima here, Mayapur, Calcutta, wherever she was. And we offer our humble obeisances, but we won't bow down to her because Prabhupada told us.
Her name was Baba Tarini. Oh.
And the second initiation from Bhakti Suranda Swami. And that's why she used to be in Tala a lot. She was connected.
Swami, you want to give some closing statements? Anything? Want to say something? I want you to say something. The secretary, the master of ceremony. Say a few things.
About what?
Prabhupada.
You have to tell me, what do you want to hear? I don't know.
An appreciation of what you said earlier on the reason that Srila Prabhupada established Krishna. That we can't approach Radha and Krishna without going through Vrindavan, without Lord Balaram's mercy. There's no question of approaching Radha and Krishna.
Yeah, it's Prabhupada's mercy that he allowed us to worship him. And, not just Krishna directly, but through the pure devotee. And this is actually what pleases Krishna. Really? Because Krishna says that worship of my devotee is better than worshiping myself directly. So Prabhupada gave us that facility. So he gave everything complete. That's why his final instruction was, don't add anything new, and don't subtract anything what I've already given. So I think that takes care of the controversies. Because if we have to add something, then that means that Prabhupada didn't give the complete. So there's no need to have a controversy. There's so many controversies. But Prabhupada says, don't add anything. So we should have faith in Prabhupada that what he gave was complete in every respect.
He taught us that so much. And those that were with him, you got to hear that a lot. Don't change anything.
Yeah.
Very clear message.
I remember for myself how difficult it was for me to accept and to understand, to appreciate what Prabhupada's vision was for, a worldwide movement of with temples and deity worship. And when we were at 26 Second Avenue, we were absolutely convinced that Prabhupada was just for the counterculture and it said International Society for, what was the international? It was the Lower East Side slum shop, rat infested and crummy, but that we liked that because it was so different from the shiny materialism that we had, that we were accustomed to. And how Prabhupada introduced things in a way very slowly. He didn't talk about deity. In fact, when he first gave the deities, he installed actually, someone said, a pair of Radha Krishna metal deities from India, and Prabhupada installed them. Those were the first installation. Must have been 1968 at 26 Second Avenue, and Prabhupada, how to worship the deity, And Prabhupada gave very simple things. And in fact, he said, if I told you everything that needs to be done, you'd faint. And we were so, awkward. One of the things he said is that when offering, arti, of course the arti was just incense and a bell, but then there was offering the prasadam that Prabhupada gave. He said, when doing that, you have to wear either silk or wool, because these two cloths, silk and wool, does not get contaminated. We were hardly even wearing robes at all. But so it was myself and Purushottam, we were worshiping. So we had to get cloth, so silk was out of the question. So we went down, there was Orchard Street very nearby, where you get, it was the cloth center. We could buy cloth, reams of cloth. So we got this wool, thick wool, and then we had we dyed it pink, something. And then to tie the dhoti with the wool, it was so, and then to wear it, is, I mean, what Prabhupada had to work with was very difficult. But Prabhupada's vision was, of course, far beyond what we were capable of. So we had to meet that vision, come up to that standard. And we made many mistakes, mostly mistakes, like you were saying. That was common practice.